Welcome,
Hello.
everyone. Welcome to the show. Hope everyone's doing well. I see that Sarah has a new shirt on. What's going on over there?
I do. This is my Iran, custom-made Iran jersey for the game on Friday. A nice tribute to the girls in Manab and the team. We got a 168 little Manab on the back. You probably can't see it. Got the scarf. We're ready to go.
Let's go.
It's upside down. We're ready to go.
We're ready. We're ready. Hold on. Whoa, we're ready.
Are we ready for this episode?
Now, I want to greet everybody, all of our viewers and listeners out there. Make sure you like, subscribe, comment, and share, repost. Let's go. And our guest today, friend of the show, one of the most powerful voices, needs no introduction, Scott Horton. Welcome back to DD Geopolitics.
Hi, guys. How's it going? Thank you for having me.
Good. Thank you for coming back. We appreciate it. I got to ask you right out the gate, what do you make of all the stuff going on with Iran right now?
Yeah, like what kind of question is that, Chris? It's very broad. No, Scott could give you an hour-long answer, I'm sure.
Well, people say to me, you give really long answers to questions.
No, I love your answers.
Ask me really broad questions. Yeah, that might be the broadest. Look, I like to do that too, man. I had Max Blumenthal on the show one time. I just said, tell me, son, what's bothering you? And he just talked for 45 minutes and then I had to go. It was beautiful. He's so good. Okay, so look, well, thank you for not asking me what's going to happen.
No.
Because I don't know.
Same.
But I can tell you that America lost this war, right? Essentially what happened, to boil it all down, was the Israelis convinced Trump, it'll be easy, roll the dice, go for it, man, we'll make it work. It'll be just like the last time when they barely did anything in response, and we'll get away with it, and things will only improve from here, and then you'll be remembered as Trump the Great and whatever. And he went, all right, let's do it, let's go for it. And then it didn't work. And at some point, I mean, I'm sure y'all saw the quotes where he said, he referenced 1929 and the great stock market crash that, ushered in the Great Depression and all that. And he said that was what we're up against here, which was essentially right. They called his bluff. And look, I said this just, a week or whatever into the war, that it was obvious that we already lost a couple of weeks in, and people got so upset about that. Obviously, I'm not saying that Iran has sacked Washington and burned the White House and we welcome our new Ayatollah overlords or whatever. They're not coming here. They're not threatening us. In fact, even 9/11, that wasn't Hezbollah. That was Al-Qaeda. So, that's not the threat, right? That somehow they conquered our army and are subjugating the United States of America. The question was whether we can do that to them or not. And then the answer was no. So they tried it and it didn't work. And so like in Iraq, they were able to march right in there. But then the question was, can you quell an insurgency? And it was, man, not really. You can help the super majority, cleanse them from the capital city and bribe off the bribable. And, but this isn't that. This was up against a real state army that, unlike Saddam Hussein's army, had not been being bombed ever since the Iran-Iraq war as his had. His army had been, at war, but also, suffering terribly since 1980. You know what I mean? They have not been in that position. They have not been fighting really since 1989, since the ending of that war. Whereas he almost immediately got into a war with the so-called United Nations over Kuwait, and then was under relentless bombing for 10 years before the invasion of 2003. So, and also their country is like 3.5, 4 times bigger and has 3 times the population and 2 giant mountain ranges. And so, yeah. So what are you going to do about that? Nothing. Right. And that was always the thing. That was why even George W. Bush didn't do it, is because it would not be smart, and smart people told him that, and he believed them that like, okay, this is biting off more than we can chew here. And so that was what happened. Anyway, so the thing is, after just in the beginning of April, Donald Trump threw in the towel, called ceasefire, and then was trying to figure out a way, is still trying to figure out a way to basically save face. and call it quits. But see, here's the good news, right? Is that call it whatever you want. It doesn't matter that we lost because we don't have anything to lose here. Who cares if we dominate the Gulf, except for the Saudis? But who cares what the Saudis think? You know, Osama bin Laden, the chief terrorist himself, told Abdel Bari Atwan in 1997, he goes, what am I going to do with all this oil? Drink it? Of course, it's going to be for sale, even if the head terrorist himself was in charge of it all, dude. Otherwise, it's worthless. So, you know, as far as America's national interest, it doesn't matter who dominates the Gulf. It sure as hell doesn't have to be us. And the fact that the Iranians have that much more power in the region is really W. Bush and Obama's fault. And so it's really not fair. And now Trump's fault, too, that he's increased their leverage over the rest of the powers in the region, including the United States, to such a great degree. So we're kind of not really in a position to complain about it. Might as well just quit the field. We don't even like this game anyway. The American people don't care about dominating the Middle East or not. And so, and it's true that the U.S. military did bomb the crap out of Iran's military. It's just that they still won anyway. And it is almost on the same, it's not exactly the same, but more or less on the same, you know, kind of analogous thing to just fighting an insurgency where all they have to do is not lose. It was pretty much all the state had to do here was not lose, right? The IRGC had to more or less hang on to their monopoly on power. We can't put ground troops in there. So, you know, they just had to not disintegrate and last. And then geography gives them all the advantage. And that is their ability not just to close the strait, but to hit any target that they wish all up and down the Gulf, which, like, I'm sorry, but I did tell you so for like 20 years that, you know, they can hit every target up and down that Gulf. That's why it's the Persian Gulf. It's half of one coastline is them. So, and their military centered around their missile force. And so that was the bind that we were in before we started this war and shouldn't have. So anyway, now Trump is, you know, trying to dress it up and say, you know, I don't know if you saw the clips, people are laughing at him and they're really funny. Actually, the missile one especially is the funniest one, but where he says, look, of course they can have missiles and of course they can enrich uranium. What, you expect them to not have a civilian uranium enrichment program for electricity purposes? Like, okay, man, you know, of course he didn't have to fight the war in the first place. And those are actually perfectly reasonable positions. But it's just he has to basically make it sound like, yeah, we lost, but who cares? In fact, it's a victory anyway. You know, in fact, they promised not to make nuclear weapons. Now, that's a pretty good concession, right? Even though they promised all along since 1970 when they signed and ratified the NPT under the old regime, which the new regime, you know, kept their signature to this whole time, even though they promised that again, you know, repeatedly, informally, and then formally again in the JCPOA of 2015. Like, fine, you got a big promise there. And then, so now here's the problem, of course, is the state of Israel and their ability to restart the war in Lebanon essentially at will or turn it up and down. It's not like it's over yet. They're still occupying territory there. And their lobby in the United States of America, which is still extremely powerful, although more and more it's sort of the reverse Midas touch. You know, they give financing to a candidate and then it becomes like a mark of shame, which thank goodness for that. And more of that, please. As we just saw some pro AIPAC or maybe candidates that AIPAC was pro all lost yesterday in New York, which unfortunately it was more commie types winning. But that's what's so bad about the centrists is they are warmongering Zionists. And so, you know, if you want to prevent America from going commie, you liberals need to abandon imperialism today. It's an emergency. It's the war that's bringing you down. It's the killing people that's bringing you down for real. So anyways, then, like, I don't know, man, can Trump dress it up and climb down enough? And is he really willing to restrain Netanyahu? And will it take a fight between him and Netanyahu where he has to stomp his foot or like threaten that, like, look, man, I really will cut you off and I really will tell all the people about all that stuff that we know about you and or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think he's really willing to do that. And quite frankly, I think they're still friends. And mostly choreograph this stuff. For political reasons, both of them have to be able to find some political distance from each other here. Netanyahu doesn't want to have to tell his people he lost the war any more than Trump does. So he's now blaming it all on Trump, that like, oh, he's trying to make me stop. I guess, maybe I'll have to or whatever. And then they all, his cabinet and other people want to excoriate Trump for that. But look, the professionals in the IDF must be telling Netanyahu the same thing that the Pentagon's telling Trump, which is, hey, man, we lost, pal. So what are you going to do? We can't restart the war. We don't have enough interceptors. They still have way more interceptors than we've got interceptors. So what? We're overwhelmed here. We're stuck. They know that absolute military reality, and that's what they're up against here. So at the end of the day, Netanyahu is horrible, but is he totally unreasonable in the face of America telling him, hey, man, it's time now to dial this down? I would even possibly be willing to speculate. I don't know this at all, but to me, it's even possible that the Americans and the Iranians have an understanding that it's going to take a little while to get the Israelis under control, but let's just keep going with our talks anyway, and we'll figure that part out. The Iranians they talk tough sometimes, and they have played hardball some too, but they also seem to be pretty tolerant of maybe letting the last little bit of Israel and Lebanon play out as they finish the discussions with the Trump people. Oh, and then I'll shut up after raising this point. And I don't know if you guys want to talk about this or something else, but there's also, of course, the major questions that remain unresolved. The primary motive of the war, supposedly, not the attempted regime change, but the destruction and the complete taking offline of Iran's, not just their civilian nuclear program, but especially their uranium enrichment. And that is what still remains to be solved. And they have adopted a so-called roadmap for the talks on the having of talks toward resolving that issue. But it's not going to be that easy. Although it may be easier than even skeptics would think, in the sense that it is true that Israel, and especially America's war against Iran last year in June of 25 really did set back their nuclear program in significant ways, which I could elaborate on, but in a way that it made it easier for them to climb down. Because what the hell, their nuclear bluff, their semi-nuclear latent deterrent sort of bluff had been called itself. And so, if you remember, on the eve of the war breaking out in February, the Omani negotiator, who was, they were talking in between, the Americans and the Iranians were in Oman, but they were passing messages back and forth from room to room. And the Omani negotiator came out and said that this is the day before the war, said that they were willing to suspend all uranium enrichment for between 3 and 5 years, which was huge compared to, their position in the JCPOA. And then they started the war against them the next day anyway. In fact, maybe because Witkoff was making such progress that they were like, oh no, and had to launch the war, right? Just like when David Koresh started writing down his final interpretations of the 7 SEALs, that was when they sent in the tanks, because he was going to give up, in 2 days or whatever. He was almost done.
Let me ask you on that point. I'll get to the nuclear issue in a second, and also I think we should talk about Hormuz, because I think that's still an outlier in all of this as well, in terms of the final settlement of this. But really, I think that the first point of the MOU, which is Lebanon included, we don't see really any movement by Israeli officials, be they politicians or military personnel or people in the bureaucracy, who are saying that they want to withdraw. Everybody is saying that they must stay in, and many are saying we got to continue. So my question is, if that's the first point of the MOU, and Israel, as part of the allies language that's in there, doesn't do that, isn't this already pregnant with its destruction, as we say? Isn't this already sort of unraveling? Maybe that was on purpose. Maybe that was part of the sort of, to kind of put that time bomb in there to see if this thing would even last. What do you think?
Well, yeah, and those two things are tied together, right? That there's a possibility here that this was always basically a scam to get Iran to loosen up on the strait and then go ahead and screw them over. But it's just Lebanon. It's not their home country. It's just Hezbollah and them over there. And so hopefully maybe they'll then be reluctant to clamp back down on the strait, you know, after giving up that leverage. But of course, they have to have calculated that going in, right? Did they know that? And look, you know, man, so much of this has to be speculative, and I don't want to do too much of that. Like, I really don't know. But I guess what I'm saying is that, like, the proper questions for us to be speculating about, at least, is to what degree is Trump going to be willing to tell the Israelis no, and that he really damned means it, and that they have to stop in order for him to get what he wants, which is more important than what they want. And like that, presidents don't usually do that. But see, what happened is, you know, they got in this car and then crashed it. So, you know what I mean? Again, this, like I was saying before about the IDF must, I'm speculating on this too, but they must be telling Netanyahu the same thing the Pentagon's telling Trump, that like, well, it didn't work. So now what? And they have to deal in that reality that now what, dude? You didn't pull off the thing that you were trying. So he shouldn't have to, you know, really whip Netanyahu into shape. That's why I guess I sort of still speculate that he's letting Netanyahu and the IDF still have however much leash in Lebanon for the time being, and that maybe their real final withdrawal might even have to wait until the final deal. And that possibly the Iranians even are willing to accept that. I mean, they are talking now anyway, and the violence stopped. I mean, I read antiwar.com this morning, and they killed some people yesterday. So I don't know if they killed anybody more today, but
I think they did. They attacked southern Lebanon again. But there are talks happening between Israel and Lebanon in Washington, D.C., and they are not going well. Some sources saying that they're actually no steps forward, but 2 steps back. I think that the Israeli ambassador said, we are in a train wreck. And the Times of Israel is saying that yet Shell later laid into Donald Trump's administration over its willingness to include the ceasefire in Lebanon as part of the MOU on Tuesday. And so that yesterday, I guess there was another big blow up in the DC.
That fits with the possibility that, like, you know, on both sides, they have to play their politics and they can say things, you know, that I don't put too much stock in just them bickering back and forth. You know what I mean? And in fact, I guess I still, by default, I presume that Trump and Netanyahu get along just fine. And that most of the leaks about them yelling at each other on the phone, there's a new one, actually. Maggie Haberman has a new one out, where supposedly Trump chewed Netanyahu out last October over Gaza and said, even all the Jews hate you now, and including the 2 Jews in the room, meaning Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff, because they were at their wits' end with him, supposedly over bombing Qatar and other things. But like, these anecdotes can be manufactured quite easily. You know what I mean?
Netanyahu hugging and kissing after that.
But I mean, at the same token, I could also see them being like, why the hell would you bomb Qatar? Like, we have some business interests over there. Okay, moving on. You know what I mean? Like, it could just be totally taken out of the context and kind of blown up that way. But I mean, it's no secret that Qatar and Saudi have so much money poured into Kushner that at least he has to say something like, hey guys, let's avoid bombing them.
That might have been like a $10 million check right there that like, okay, I do have to say one thing at this meeting just to check a box here and cash a check. Well, yeah, so I don't know. I guess I would say that here's an extra little thing in it, is that Vance is running the negotiations, not Marco Rubio, and he has a real interest in ending this, if only for his own political good, that he's the one who started ending it and has to be able to be seen carrying a victory here, which, you know, compare that to Hillary Clinton going, come on, Obama, you got to invade Libya for me. I'm going to run on it in 2016. I need this war, please. Vance is trying to run on ending one. So like, you know, we got to grade these things somewhat on a curve, but, look, it is solvable, guys. But the problem is, at the end of the day, 2 major things have to happen. America, well, Donald Trump basically has to go to back to the status quo, which is America accepts enrichment only with intrusive inspections and lots of reassurances. And then Iran retains their half-assed nuclear capability for what it's worth, right? Their latent nuclear deterrent, which, as we just saw last June, when Donald Trump called their bluff on it, they weren't able to do anything about it. And he took their major enrichment facilities offline. So, for what it's worth, they're going to keep some enrichment and they're going to promise not to do anything military with it. And Trump's going to have to accept that. And also, he's going to have to explain to Netanyahu that these are the limits of the Netanyahu doctrine, pal. Right? There's only so much we can do for you. And I don't want to hear it about it ain't enough, because I went ahead and I did the big one for you that you were demanding and that nobody else would do. And I tried it and it didn't work. So now shut up. I mean, he's going to have to do that, and or even just get Netanyahu to agree that, like, look, you understand, right? Like, again, Trump is not Barack Obama. If it was Barack Obama, they'd have to have a big dramatic fight or whatever. But I think that Netanyahu and Trump are pals. I think they always have seen eye to eye on virtually everything and like whatever. You know what I mean? They have no reason. Netanyahu has no incentive to do anything but flatter Donald Trump every moment that they speak. Oh, your highness, your wise leadership, you know, I need missiles, whatever. You know what I mean? Always.
Cyrus the Great
likes that stuff. And so, like, what, they're not fighting. I don't believe they're really fighting, you know. I sure would like to see it. And I do think that maybe it may come down to that's what it takes, but I hope that Trump can just tell him the facts of life in a calm tone of voice, and that Netanyahu would essentially have to give in. Because, again, what is he going to do about it? He's going to send his Air Force to just go bomb Tehran alone? No. And suffer the consequences of that? No. Or he's going to restart the war and drag Trump in and force Trump to now continue expending the last of our defensive missiles and the rest, field our Navy and our Air Force back over there to back him up. In fact, I interviewed Larry Johnson the other day, the former CIA analyst and great anti-war analyst, and
good friend of the show.
Oh, good. So, and forgive me, man, I forgot the military acronym for it or whatever, but it's these relatively small, very short-term, intermediate sort of operating bases that when they're really ready to fight, they set these up on the East Coast, in Europe, in the Middle East, and this is part of the chain of logistics for setting up the war. And Larry said to me, he goes, this is how I knew. And in fact, I think he did tell me this back in January and February. This is how he knew that they were going to war, was because they were moving assets into place that they don't move these assets into place when they're bluffing, man. It's happening. But then he told me the other day, they're moving those assets out. They're closing those things down. I'm sorry, I forget the name of the dang things he was telling me, but I'm sure it's on his website, Sonar 21, that they're closing these things down. And you can hear it in the interview. It's right here on the YouTube's Scott Horton show. And so he took that to mean that, like, oh, we are like, hey, we are packing things up. We're not. I don't know. I'm sorry. I don't know what's the latest status on the location of the carrier battle groups and all that, but it looks like Trump's not even bluffing at this point, right? He is like truly seeking to finish these negotiations. Apparently, you know, judging by his military posture there, at least.
So to sum it up, then you don't think we're going for round 3 at this point. Some are speculating that, but you would probably lean against that.
Yeah. Well, look, man, I have to admit, I have not been reading enough. I have so many stupid different projects going on. I'm always fighting the last war. Like, for example,
if you read, you'd just be more confused. So just it doesn't matter. If you read the news, you'd be more confused. So that's why we're asking you.
That may be true. But look, again, you know, I really hate speculating. I just try to, you know, explain what I'm weighing in my hypotheticals, you know. I think that, look, even in Donald Trump's mind, we can intuit, right, from, like, we can infer from him calling a truce here, from him being willing to. I mean, I don't know what his other option was, to go ahead and use atomic bombs or something, but he's essentially out of options. And so now he has to accept enrichment. He has no choice but to go back to the Obama position, which is, okay, but just don't make bombs out of it, though, because then I'll get upset. That's That was the W. Bush position. That was even the Donald Trump 1 position, even though he tore up the treaty, which was stupid. It wasn't exactly a treaty, but same difference. Even though tearing it up was stupid, essentially, he didn't start a war against them. He just killed Soleimani and whatever. He didn't go, on a massive bombing campaign against Natanz and Fordo and Isfahan as he did this time. And so this was the status quo, was, Israel barking, America bomb them, and America telling the Israelis no, but then telling the Iranians, but don't you break out and try to make a nuke, because then I will bomb you. And then they said, hey, look, man, we're not making nukes, just electricity, so don't bomb us. But obviously we can enrich to whatever percent we want, so don't bomb us. Right? That was the standoff before. And essentially that's where we're going back to now, even though Trump has already proved it's basically a hollow bluff, because again, and by the way, Trump didn't need to prove it, right? Like, you could have believed Barack Obama when he said, if they break out toward a nuke, I will bomb them before they're done. They won't finish the project because they'll be dead. He meant that. It was absolutely clear. And that was the bind the Ayatollah was in. Assume the Ayatollah really did want a nuke. Well, he knew he couldn't make one. All this hype about there's a secret, illicit nuclear weapons program in Iran, that was a lie every single time. There's no such thing. There was the open civilian electricity program that if they wanted to convert it into a weapons program, they could, but not without America knowing. You can't just take the civilian program you have and all of a sudden turn it into a Manhattan Project, kick the IAEA inspectors out of the country without America starting a war before you're done. So that was a perfect standoff before the war. We can just go back to that. And then hey, no harm, no foul, except for the 3,000 dead people, including a lot of little kids, and absolute shame and dishonor on this country, and the destruction of hundreds of billions of dollars and the rest. Blowback terrorism beginning on the first night of the war here in my hometown of Austin, Texas, where some kook went downtown and shot 18 people, killed 3, wounded 15 more with an AR-15 before the cops got him. And luckily he picked a place where there's cops standing on every street corner down on 6th Street on a Friday night or on a Saturday night. Just goes to show how absolutely lousy with soft targets this country is. And the only way to provide security then for America is to stop intervening in other countries, because there is no way to lock down every bar in America where if some kook wants to go take revenge on innocent people enjoying a Saturday night out, what are you going to do? You got bouncers, but yeah, come on. If he'd had 3 or 4 friends with him, it would have been called the Saturday Night Massacre. And then, they would have probably blamed it on Hezbollah or whatever, but we would have known that it didn't happen on the 27th. It happened on March 2nd, or the night of the 1st, I guess.
Let me ask you. So we have Iran simultaneous to that, and I was just in the Donbass. I'm heading back here in a few days. We had heard from presidential aide to President Putin, Mr. Ushakov, that the spirit of Anchorage is dead, more or less. Lavrov and Zakharova, everybody now has kind of confirmed that whatever agreement was made behind the scenes between Putin and Trump in Anchorage, never mind it's not being realized, the U.S. and the Europeans are deepening their commitment to Ukraine now, not lessening it. They're deepening it. In fact, we have I can tell you this because I was just on the phone and I met with the deputy of Crimea. Crimea is under tremendous assault right now. I mean, it is brutal. Shutting down bridges, shutting down oil. We have friends there right now. There's intermittent electricity. It's really, and today Zelensky said that they're going to put the pressure on Crimea to push Putin to the negotiating table. I think it's going to backfire and push him to the Oreshnik stage even more so. But I want to ask you, we have Iran happening now. And now we still have a deepening crisis in Eastern Europe and a deepening crisis vis-a-vis this NATO war on Russia. Where do you see that heading? Especially because we're in an election cycle here. And the Democrats are even more wild and more crazy for Ukraine, Europe, and NATO. So I'm really fearful that we're not going to get out of this cycle anytime soon. What do you think about that?
Well, I mean, the only bright spot there is that Trump is not enthusiastic about backing Ukraine, though he continues to back them. And he signed a statement at the G7 meeting in France about, we support the eternal fight against Eurasia and whatever. So, what the hell? As far as the politics inside Moscow, I really don't know, but I can only assume that they're not going to back down. I mean, they've hit these major facilities in Moscow, these oil refineries and all of that kind of thing. I'm not sure the totals of how much that set them back in terms of, proportion of their overall production and distribution or whatever. I assume it ain't nothing. I know that they've been, even hitting targets in, pretty far east. I think what they said 3,000 kilometers. So what's that, like 2,000 miles or something? God dang.
All the way to the Urals, to like Ekaterinburg and Perm and these kind of play way out there. We're talking, in the Asian part.
So look, man, there's a lot about this war that I don't understand. I think on the face of it, both sides say that they're fighting a war of attrition, that they're not in a hurry to take this territory, which, come on, you could also argue that that's just a coping mechanism for the fact that they're taking it very slowly. You know what I mean? They are taking it very slowly. But both sides say that what they're doing is just trying to chew up the other guy's army until it's beaten and they can do what they want and go where they want, assuming that, Ukrainian strikes inside Russia are effective to whatever degree against their force, then that, it's not like it's going to just drive them out of there, but it could very well force them to now then make a decision about whether to increase the pace of the war, because now they can't just fight a war of attrition if they're getting all these targets inside Russia hit all the time. They would rather maybe go ahead and speed it up. I mean, after all this, they still call this a police action, right? Like JFK in Vietnam. Like, oh, what war? This is just our guys killing people in a country that we've invaded. What? It's not, but it's not a general mobilization. It ain't World War II. You know what I mean? And so that's what they're saying here. And they, are paying bonuses and have a largely volunteer army, but they could conscript. Well, I guess they have conscripts, but I was reading that as, the well-paid guys go to the front and the conscripts do the logistics in the rear and that kind of thing. But they could call up a mass, mobilization of troops and do a real ass invasion. We call this the full-scale war since 22, but that's only compared to the, much more underground intervention on both sides after 2014. And, it was a much lower scale civil war, especially after Minsk 2 in 2015, where they called back all the heavy artillery and stuff like that and airstrikes and all that. So, but is it a real full-scale war compared to a full-scale war? No, but it could be. And, now I don't know if that would be wise on the part of the Russians. It would obviously be extraordinarily costly in many ways for them to do that. But I guess that's one of the questions that they got to answer, is whether they're willing to keep this thing going for, ad infinitum, or whether they have to wrap this war up. And it's going to be extraordinarily expensive either way. And as I've said, before, quite frankly, I think they're going to regret it. I think, ultimately, especially all the current hype aside, I think ultimately Russia will win this war. Or at least, the negotiations, it'll be a negotiated settlement, but it'll come down, very heavily on their side in terms of the territory they've already taken, and maybe even territory that they still claim and haven't taken yet. However, when all that is said and done, they'll have taken everyone in Ukraine who likes Russia out of Ukraine and drawn a new national border around them and made them Russians, and left a Ukraine that hates their guts behind. But meanwhile, just like Ukraine is stuck with Russia as a neighbor, so is Russia stuck with Ukraine. And when it used to be that the more Russia leaning parties, I don't want to necessarily overstate that, but the more Russian leaning parties from the East, they would win. That was why America had to, intervene over there and overthrow the government every 10 years or so in order to make sure that their guy was in there instead. Well, that's never going to happen again. And now you got, the likes of Andriy Beletsky, who clearly has ambitions to be the future Führer of the country, and just might well be. He's only like third or fourth most popular political figure in the country, and he may be voted most likely to do a military coup d'état and just go ahead and install his own ass in power. And who's going to stop him when he's the head of the Third Army Corps? That's a real kind of danger, especially when the current president is sitting there unelected, years out of power, like Chancellor Palpatine up there, extending his term in office for the war. So look, the whole thing is the gravest emergency, and it just bothers me. I know that it's impossible to make this happen in any real way or whatever, but it just seems to me that as soon as this war really broke out in hot fighting, when Russian troops crossed in the border in February of 2022, that all 7 or 8 billion, whatever it is, human beings should have just all gone on general strike and just said, absolutely not. We're just going to not tolerate a hot war on Russia's eastern border 200-300 miles from Moscow like this. We're just going to not have that. So whoever has to go to Geneva and sit down and figure it out. And then we'll go back to making stuff and shipping and distributing it to people. But otherwise, no. Right? Like, how can we tolerate this? How can this be going on now in 2026, halfway through, and we're still talking about this hot war just a few hundred miles from Moscow, when these guys are absolute hardliners? And I don't mean absolute. They're very hardliners. There are people who are harder line, but they're not, they're not the friendliest of sorts. And they're sitting on 7,000 H-bombs.
Yeah.
And for that matter, they're sitting on, a few thousand, maybe it's only like 5,000 H-bombs and a few thousand more usable tactical nuclear weapons of just the atom bomb strength that, that all of that could come into play. And people think that it can't, but they're wrong. People think, well, we haven't used nuclear weapons since America, stood unopposed and no one else had them. But ever since then, we don't use them because nobody wants to get their capital city nuked. And so, yeah, but that's really just whistling past the graveyard. I mean, the whole point, in fact, if you even listen to the way that they talk about nuclear deterrence now, they will say that nuclear deterrence means that we can fight a conventional war with Russia and even kick their ass in one and not have to worry about them using nukes, because we have nukes too. So to be mutually deterrent, and so we can just act like there's no nukes at all. When, of course, the whole point of the nuclear deterrent was so that you don't start a war against the other guy at all, because it could then lead to the use of these nukes. And I swear people are really, look at the way that this is talked about in the news lately by the hawks and the major papers and things like that, that like, yeah, no, nuclear deterrence means that we can get away with more. And they wouldn't dare use nukes because they know that we have them too. And in fact, I did a debate at Oxford University where the question for the debate was, this house, meaning, I don't know, the rich kids of Oxford who aren't going to war, or England, or just the West, or the United States of America is probably what they really mean, the Yanks. This house says that we would rather go to war with Russia than lose Ukraine. And I started my argument with, yeah, but see, we can't fight Russia, whoever this house is, because they have hydrogen bombs. So that's it. You understand? If we had a real war between NATO and the Russian Federation, London would be gone. Oxford would be gone. There'd be nobody left to write about what a mistake it all was. And they all just scoffed at me. These like liberal Democrat kids, whatever they call them over there, they're just, liberal Democrat college kids. They all went, pfft. Meaning what exactly? That nuclear weapons don't exist? Which I know there are people who think that, but it's a very fringe flat earth kind of conspiracy kookery that thinks that there's no such thing as fission or fusion, because there is too, dude. And then so what's the other explanation for the scoff? They think that, like, no, they just have this daydream that says we would mobilize NATO. In other words, virtually all of Europe, less a couple of the Balkans and Belarus. And we would all, with the United States too, we would all go to war against the Russian Federation and crush them. And they're not going to use nukes. Because what are they going to do? Use nukes? When the answer is, yeah, they use nukes. They destroy every major city in Europe, every major military base, and every major city, and in the United States too. And then we would kill every single city in Russia and in Belarus, and it would be the end of northern human civilization. All that our ancestors have built for 10,000 years, completely destroyed over nothing. Over who controls Dnipropetrovsk, as though anyone west of the whatever, the river Bug cares,
It's true. The sad part of all of this is that we really are very close to that. People are openly talking about the use of tactical nuclear weapons in Russia. Openly. It's not like a fringe thing.
Yeah. The Americans say that the Russians have a policy called escalate to de-escalate, which says that they might go ahead and be the first to use a nuke, even in a relatively minor war, sort of like Ukraine, especially if they thought that it was, escalating to war with NATO, that they would use a nuke just to show how crazy and how reckless they were. And that, oh my God, they really are serious, and that to make us back down. But then the Americans announced, and this was under Obama, I'm virtually certain this was under Secretary of Defense Gates under Obama, that they said publicly, oh yeah, well, we know and we recognize that that's your strategy. And so therefore we have a strategy, which is called nuh-uh. And if you do that, then we will use an even bigger nuke on you. And in fact, in the scenario, they ran a war game and they published it and said, if Russia nukes Ukraine as a demonstration for how crazy they are, then we will nuke Belarus. And then they better understand that, no, we're the ones who are loco. We're the ones who will escalate. Now you better de-escalate. When, pardon me, but didn't they just prove that that doesn't work? They just proved that doesn't work by announcing that that'll never work. Well, so then why should they expect that it'll work on the Russians? And why should the Russians be so stupid as to think that that would be a policy that would work on us? In fact, the first to use nukes has just blown the world's brains out, dude. The first to use nukes in a war between America and Russia has just led to general nuclear war. Because we hit them here, then they hit us there, and then we hit them here, and then they nuke NATO headquarters, and then we nuke Moscow, and then that's it. And then thousands of these things go off, at least a couple of thousand on each side. And so Europe and America and Russia are destroyed. And under previous war plans, they said, we'll also go ahead and nuke every city in China while we're at it, because if we all have to die, then we'll be goddamned if we're going to leave the world to those dirty Chicons. So we'll kill all of them too.
Speaking of nukes, I think it's the perfect segue to another small island nation, about 90 miles off the coast.
Nukes, Russia, and Chicoms. Oh my!
Almost ended in the same situation. In the 1960s. Let's talk about Cuba. What's happening with Cuba? Is this the next rodeo for the Trump administration, for Rubio and the gang to go in there and overthrow Cuba?
I'll tell you what, I mean, they clearly have been working hard on presenting options to the president on this issue. I mean, there's just no question that he has ordered them to review it. He's got, Marco Rubio, of course, and Susie Wiles and others from Florida and, very, under the influence of the Cuban lobby there. And this is a dream come true for a lot of anti-communists for a very long time, is that somebody would go ahead and do something about it. Nobody ever talks about this that I've heard, although whatever, I don't know. It seems crucial to me that John F. Kennedy promised the Soviets, and both sides totally, absolutely agreed at the end of the Cold War, that all previous agreements and treaties and everything as far as recognizing each other's rights and protecting, scaling down conflicts and whatever that, all those still stand, right? All the treaties that the Soviet Union signed, Russia was still bound by, and vice versa and all that. So when Jack Kennedy promised Khrushchev that, one, we'll get all of our missiles out of Turkey and implicitly out of Italy as well, our Jupiter missiles, mid-range missiles or intermediate range missiles. And also that we promise never to invade Cuba again if the Soviets will get their nuclear missiles out of Cuba. And Khrushchev did turn around and get them all out of there. And it's important too, by the way, that this deal was totally secret. It was cut by the Attorney General, who happened to be the president's brother, acting on his behalf, completely cutting out the State Department and CIA and the National Security Council. And they made the deal, totally back channel. And this was a secret and deniable deal. They could have just pretended it never happened. It didn't come out, and we didn't learn the full truth of it, including the missiles in Italy going as well, until after the end of the Soviet Union. Not just the end of the Cold War, but the end of the USSR altogether. And all those files came out and showed that this was the extent of the deal. So this is, look, there's nothing sacred in politics at all, especially not in international politics. But of course, because there is no world government other than the USA, that means that when these governments make, especially these most crucial deals about who's stationing hydrogen bombs where, that our word matters, and that other countries know that if we make a promise on something like this, that it really should stick. And so that should be it until, whatever, the end of communism by whatever means in Cuba that takes place without American intervention there. Certainly we've been blasting them with whatever radio free, whatever it is this whole time. So, but otherwise we just have to leave it up to them. And look, this goes back to, just this should be the most obvious thing to anyone, especially now, but this is the crucial libertarian point, as Murray Rothbard put it years ago, that we, of course, as libertarians, we believe in universal rights of all mankind, but locally enforced. And just because we believe that all humans are born free doesn't mean that we believe that we have to live in a world empire that exists to guarantee the rights of every individual on earth. Just what it says in the Constitution. These states in the Union and under the laws agreed by this Congress, etc. It's not a mandate to rule the world. And so it's a total perversion really to take it as that, you know what I mean? That we have the right to continue to intervene in this kind of way. And of course, look what happens to our freedom when we build a world empire. Our financial freedom. I mean, look at one of the hugest scandals right now in America is how nobody can afford a house. I saw news statistics yesterday about how many Gen Z, younger adults, but people even in their late 20s still live with their parents. And even they have jobs, but it's the price of housing is absolutely through the roof. Well, a huge part of that is an inflationary monetary policy that is necessary to prop up the empire. And of course, then the empire becomes necessary to prop up the inflationary monetary policy when we can just cut all of that off. And there's so many other consequences for our civil liberties in terms of, Patriot Acts and NSA spying and FBI, FISA 702 and all of these things. Fusion centers and all of the surveillance that we just all take for granted now, that all comes about because of the permanent state of emergency. And so how can we spread freedom around the world and export all of this freedom when we don't even have any left of our own? We're desperate, just try to hang our own country together here. So it just makes no sense to build this empire. It's totally counterproductive. And more, everybody knows that, right? Like you could be a total Wilsonian in your heart and want to free all mankind and recognize the limits of the U.S. Army and Air Force to do that for people. And you could also be for kicking ass against our enemies in the name of national security and recognize that, hey, who's our biggest enemy? Our $40 trillion national debt and our national government that put us in this position. That's our enemy. That's who threatens the life and liberty of the American people here. That's who we need to focus on. And more and more, that's the consensus. People are just having the hardest time being convinced of why their priorities should be on who rules the Donbass, or, why we should help Israel expand their borders another, however many 100 square kilometers into Syria or Lebanon or what's left of Palestine or God knows Transjordan or what.
Before you go, I have to just ask this on behalf of myself, and I've been asked it hundreds of times. We already talked about the schisms of sort of appearing. The title of the show is The Cracks Begin to Show. There's some in the administration. You agree with me in saying that the one between Trump and Netanyahu is probably fake, but at least Vance is breaking away from this sort of thing. But myself and a lot of the people that I've talked to have said, I'm not going to buy any drama between Trump or Vance and the Israelis until somebody says something about the NDAA. What are your thoughts on the NDAA? I've been saying the executive can say whatever they want because it's clear that the legislature is already captured and they're pushing through this sort of merger. You mentioned data fusion. That's kind of what jogged my brain.
Sure. Yeah, no, I'm glad you brought it up. Listen, well, first of all, those are different issues, right? If somebody says, I don't want to hear anything about cutting off foreign aid to Israel until I hear the NDAA addressed, then that's correct framing. As far as the deal to end the war with Iran, that's a separate issue. And in fact, this could be part of a bribe to get the Israelis to go along. Is that, look, you'll get this even better welfare deal than you had previously. Whatever, could be connected in that way, in the sense of actually this deal being worse in order to get that deal through. That would make sense. Otherwise, they're basically separate issues. But it's still right that I don't want to hear anything about a deal until I hear Trump say, I signed the new deal, and the new deal, we agree. They're going to open the stray, or, leave it open, and they're going to keep tolls at a reasonable price. I don't know if you saw in the MOU where they go, and they won't charge any tolls for 60 days. And then after that, it won't be an international waterway. It will be controlled by Iran and Oman in a separate new deal. That was even in the understanding. Boy, did Trump climb down farther than I thought he'd be able to. But then, look, the huge sticking point here is the uranium. But then again, as Donald Trump said the other day, hey, everybody's got to have a little uranium. What do you want a guy to do? Go around the world without some uranium doing risks? That's not fair. So he can just do that, right? He can go from, as I was joking before, I hope he does this. He can go from demanding unconditional surrender to just surrendering unconditionally. He don't give a damn. You guys read that MOU. All they got to do is one thing: reopen the strait under their new rules. And we got to do every other thing for them. And he can still call it a win, but God dang. So, but we should not get ahead of ourselves, because it ain't a deal till it's a deal. The MOU is just the MOU, and we'll see how far advanced gets. But, look, again, we didn't need to have this war in the first place at all. So all you have to do is move the red line back to where it was, put lipstick on it, somehow make it look convincing, and then, hopefully go back to the closest thing to the status quo ante as we can, at least in terms of Iran's nuclear program and all that stuff. And then if they can get a deal on the nuclear program, then that's it. Now, as far as what that means for America's posture in the region and keeping all those bases in Saudi and Qatar and Kuwait and Bahrain and Iraq and Jordan and the rest, I don't know. It seems virtually certain they'd scale a lot of that back. Earth to Donald Trump. Here's a perfect chance. Hey, Texas to Donald Trump. There's a perfect chance for you to say, you know what? Those bases were Jimmy Carter's idea anyway, dude. I think they're stupid and lame. That's what a Democrat would do. That's what Bill Clinton would do. Expand bases in the Middle East. That's what Barack Obama wanted, him and Michelle. So we're going to pull the bases out. Go ahead, dude. Call it whatever you want, and just go ahead and call it quits.
One last question before I let you go. Chris might have another one, but I've been obsessed with the pool. I'm obsessed with the reflecting pool. It's a metaphor. It's just a work of art. But it kind of is a comedy, a little bit. But when you take a step back and you look at the entirety of DC, which I didn't make this collage, and if I did, top left wouldn't be there. But as you could see, the rest of it is kind of what's happened to DC. And now we're about to celebrate our 250th, and who's performing there? None other than Kash Patel's girlfriend, who thinks she's a country music star. It's just like, it's depressing. I kind of wanted to know what your thoughts are on this.
Yeah, I went and saw Willie Nelson at the 4th of July picnic last year, and I really wish I'd gotten tickets this year. It's just so expensive, and I'm so broke. But then I kind of, when I was thinking about that and deciding not to, then I didn't remember that, like, oh, no, but this is the 250th, dude. You really should be at Willie. This may be the last 4th of July picnic with him anyway. But anyway, we saw him last year, and that's close enough. But, I don't know, man. Everybody celebrate in your own hometown with your people, man. Have a good time.
There it is.
Chris?
No, I was just saying, how would you assess as a libertarian? How would you assess 250? But I guess I don't know. I guess it's an open book. Maybe it's an open.
Yeah.
It's
Everybody go reread the Declaration.
Yeah, we're gonna rewrite our own.
By Murray Rothbard. Okay, I gotta run, guys. Thank you so much for having me again.
Thank you for coming, Scott. We'll see you soon.
Yes, Scott.
Another great episode. Another great Scott. But
episode.
it is a little bittersweet. This is our last Wednesday episode for the foreseeable future. We are moving to Tuesdays and Thursdays.
So it's not a sad thing. We're actually doing more episodes.
Well, I'm ecstatic because Wednesday is my favorite yoga class, and I haven't gone since we started. I really haven't gone since we started doing the show because it goes a little too long. So I don't like to be rushed. I really don't like that. It makes me nervous. Gives me agita, if you will. Makes me verklempt.
Oh God! There it is. You want to give me heart palpitations now.
I don't really have anything else. Trump crashed out before we hopped on stream, so I have Iran on the ropes, ready to go down for the fall, willing to give us practically anything, and for the first time in decades, respecting the hell out of the United States and its president, me.
Oh yeah, sure. Respecting the hell out of the killers of all these kids at Minab. Sure.
They wouldn't even take a photo with you, guy. Like they wouldn't even shake. Like, get out of here with this nonsense. I'm just so sick of it, and that's kind of the reason why I didn't even upload a lot of the assets. I'm sick of not the back and forth. I should say just the constant American messaging. It's yucky. It's mixed. It's stupid, and we're just kind of waiting for the disaster that will be the 250th anniversary. I will say something. Oh, Trump denied Minab again just now.
Really?
He's with Mark Rutte, his NATO boy toy. And interestingly enough, though, I didn't want to ask Scott this, but I'll ask you because we've been talking a lot about Turkey and them being in the F-35 program, et cetera, et cetera. Now Trump, I don't know if he's just doing it to piss off Israel, probably. But he's in the Oval Office with Mark Rutte singing the praises of Turkey and saying, I'm going to give them a big surprise in regards to the F-35 program. They're a really strong NATO ally. Kind of seems like he's putting the screws to Israel a little bit, kind of just trying to make them squirm a little because they did bomb Lebanon again today. Hezbollah just released another statement saying for the second time in less than 48 hours, Israeli forces targeted Lebanese civilians sheltering in residential areas. An attack on Baalbek yesterday at 16:30 resulted in the direct targeting and killing of 2 civilians. What the aggressor did not achieve by force, he will never achieve through negotiations. Hezbollah firmly rejects the fire that was lit and is committed to monitoring and countering these violations. So I'm not sure. Everything is so volatile right now.
I mean, I would say they might be setting up the stage for the war that Israel wants against Turkey.
I thought they were, and I hate to do this on a stream. I don't want to let me just disclaim this. I don't mean anything by it. I did float the idea that they were setting up for a false flag. They know something horrible is coming. They want to distance themselves from Israel and looking like they're causing any of this sort of blowback. So I don't know. I worry about the 250th and I worry about the game on Friday. This is the first game that the United States is actually allowing Iran to stay in the country the night before. I don't know. But I'll be there.
I'm nervous. I'm nervous about situation here. I really think that this is going to escalate.
In Russia, 100%.
Yeah, people are racing. There could be theoretically the use of much larger munitions and much larger scale bombardment, which could. I mean, who knows? The Germans are saying they want to invade Kaliningrad. The Poles are pissed off at the Ukraine. I mean, the whole situation is just getting out of control now.
It is getting out of control.
It's a train wreck. If Crimea suffers anymore, some point, the Russians either will do full mobilization or partial mobilization and increase the level of bombardment. I mean, we didn't even say this. Zelensky is threatening Belarus.
Oh, yeah. We touched on it last time. We talked about how he's threatening the towers along the border, saying that he'll get rid of them if he doesn't stop giving Russia information.
He's continuing to do that. Belarus might enter into the fight as well. And Belarus, of course, is an army that has a lot of people ready to go. It's on the border, and I mean, it's within striking distance of Kiev. So I hope Zelensky understands that he opens up that can of worms, and there's no putting it back in.
He pulled back. He says that the relay stations have stopped operating on June 22nd.
Oh, how nice.
Calling his bluff. I mean, don't forget, Belarus is underneath the Russian nuclear umbrella.
It sure is.
Maybe the Europeans told him, this is what are my predictions? I'm going to be there, so Iran's going to win. They're going to win. Once they win, they'll be in first place in the group. Yes. Also, a super chat. How can we get a t-shirt like this? I got this from Etsy. I just got it custom made for the match. But yeah, I can put the link on the post on my personal profile. It's just something that I don't know. I just wanted everything that I looked at had the lion flag, and I was like, that's not gonna happen. So I'll wear this, and then I'll hopefully find some official merch when I get down there. Everything was sold out. Mashallah, or alhamdulillah, maybe. But everything is sold out. Iran's official everything is sold out. Jerseys, scarves, hoodies, it's all gone. T-shirts, gone.
I love it.
We're doing great. Beloved Iran. But thank you, guys. I will be at the game on Friday. And Chris is going on a big trip again tomorrow, right?
Yes.
We will know where he is when he comes back, as always. But yeah, you guys take care. And we're not going to stick with Wednesday. I need to go back to my Wednesday slow flow yoga. I love slow flow. It's hatha to yin, and it just is. Yeah, you guys, I need to go back to yoga. And plus, you're gonna get 3 shows a week. Way more content. More guests,
Tuesdays,
more content.
Thursdays and Sundays.
Yeah. Chris, when do you come back from your trip? Well, when do you come back? Well, we'll still have Sunday show, but when do you come back from the trip?
I come back from the trip next week, and then after that, we're going to another very important country. So yeah, we're on the move.
We will see you guys, and we'll see you at the World Cup on Wednesday. If you're there, come find me. Make Chris jealous. And other than that, we'll see you guys on Sunday. Travel safe, Chris. Take care.
Good to see you.